Neil Andrews, I'm a fan. I'm an instant fan of because he's got pedigree that. But he's a lifetime musician. He's a keyboard player. Columbus music scene, now in Franklin, Tennessee. He's got a long history of a lot of cool stuff. So I want to thank you for being part of this. This is wonderful.
Absolutely.
We're going to talk about your history of music and then the spiritual realms and how music and your spiritual life intersect.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So how are you doing these days?
Physically or mentally?
Mentally. Physically is probably
doing well. I feel like sometimes, I think our RAM is limited up here, and sometimes you need to get rid of some of the old RAM.
Penguins on an iceberg.
Yes.
Well, yeah. So one hops off the other.
That's very good. Yes, yeah. I like it. Yeah.
So so how did you get started? Go way back. Let's get to the way back machine and let's talk about your earliest memories of music.
Okay. I can tell you, I remember, it's funny, my dad was a photographer, and there's a picture that he shot that he won a contest with, and it's me, and I was about a year and a half old sitting at my grandmother's piano with this very peculiar look on my face. And I noticed my head shape hasn't changed at all. It's still Charlie Brown, but I remember, let's join the club, right? I remember starting to take piano lessons when I was 4 years old. And my mom, she was trying to be encouraging, and the piano teacher was also very encouraging. She was from Germany and very astute and knowledgeable. And I remember getting to a point, I think I was must have been junior high school. And it wasn't you can't go out and play if you don't practice piano, but it started that way. And I got to a point where I was just kind of tired of doing that. And I really wanted, I wish I could remember how old I was. It was junior high school. I really thought I'd like to play the guitar because that looked really cool.
Yeah.
And I was playing for church, I go and play out of the hymnal and play for church. And I was hoping for Christmas that I might get an electric guitar. And what I got was, I don't know if you know what it is or not. I got a Vox Jaguar. Vox Continental and the Vox Jaguar were the two really, I guess they've got more of a beach sound to them. It's more like Beach Boys kind of stuff.
Okay.
Question Mark and the Mysterians.
All right. Yep.
Whatever that song was. Da, 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 too many years.
96 years or 90?
Yeah, 96 years. Yeah. That's what that was. And my dad had purchased a kit from Heathkit, and he built the whole thing. He spent like 2 months every night, and he had it hidden, and he was doing all the soldering and all of that. So that's what I got for Christmas. And I was torn because I was grateful. But I was sad it wasn't a guitar. But then he spent all that time doing that. So I felt like, well, I guess I need to keep working on that. So
you're probably of the age also that you could probably pitch a fit and it would be part of the age.
Yeah, probably. And I just but I really appreciated my parents investing and knowing that there was a benefit to doing that. I don't think my mom ever fully understood all of them. I mean, I've done music forever. I've done it that's what I remember doing forever. And since the time I was out of college and making a living doing that, I talked to mom long distance on the phone. And it's like, so have you thought about getting a job with, something? It's like, you don't have a real job. You're a musician.
Yeah. Well, I say that myself. I haven't had a real job since 1988.
Yeah.
And how do we define real job? Something I hate, I dread going to.
Sure.
Yeah. And something that has nothing to do with my passions.
Who you are. Right.
Yeah.
And if you are, if if you are passionate about making it a business, and that's one of the things that I remember playing in a club one time when I was younger, playing in a club, and the club owner said, if you want to do this for a living, you need to look at it as a business first, and then look at it as an artistic thing as second. And I kind of still struggle with that, but I do know if you want to be successful at it, you have to treat it like a business.
Yeah.
And you can't play in a club and have somebody go, well, we didn't have the attendance we thought we would tonight, so we can't pay you. Or go in and do a session for somebody that's well known and have them say afterward, well, God didn't provide like we thought he was going to. So, and I've had that happen too. So
yeah,
that's not God's fault.
yeah. It's like this reminds me of like old Motown documentaries, how the Motown musicians
oh man,
they would try that shenanigans with them, and they all pulled out their piece.
Right? Yeah.
You're gonna pay me more.
Yeah.
In other words, you're gonna pay me what you said. And at the end of the night, they got twice as much as they were offered.
Oh yeah.
each one of them had a gun.
That's Detroit.
Yeah. But this was James Jamerson. These are my heroes.
Oh yeah.
Jamerson, Uriel Jones was the drummer.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you know Larry London? Do you know who Larry London was?
Larry London is a drummer.
Yeah. And he's one of the people that encouraged me to move down here, or our family to move down here. And he was on very early Motown stuff. And if I remember correctly, he was talking about having done Tears of a Clown, and what else? Heard It Through Grapevine, and some things like that. But he was underage when he was doing that stuff, and he had to get an ID, so it looked like he was old enough to be in the clubs. Barry Gordy made him fight.
Yeah, he was. His name was Ralph.
It's Ralph Gallant. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he met some female in the bar one night, and her name was Larry London. It's spelled Larrie, Londin, and that's where his name came from. Yeah. But that was the early Motown thing. But so that I don't know if you're talking about Standing in the Shadows of Motown.
Yes.
One of my favorite documentaries.
That is where that came from.
Yeah.
They talked about even the guy who even Robert White was the guitar player. Even Robert White had his own little piece.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Everybody did. Well, that's survival, I guess.
Yeah. No, you're gonna pay me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never done that. I've never
Nope, me either.
Yeah. So we're a tribe. So you should treat it like a business. It's like that's when things will change.
Sure.
Yes.
So, but you were asking me about memories of things. So I had around 13 years of classical training, private instruction. I had 4 years of classical pipe organ, which I did not like, and lots of years of vocal instruction. But the pipe organ is a very strange thing. I love the sound of it. I love to play it. But if you understand the physics of how the pipe organ works, you push on the key, it blows the air through whatever size pipe it is, and then the sound comes out. So you push on the key, you go, and then about however many milliseconds later, the sound comes out. And the first time I got to do that with a congregation, so playing during a service, it disturbed me because it's like you go, well,
it's kind of like jamming on Zoom.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, because the congregation is always behind and you can't catch up because the organ, the way it works. But it's a powerful instrument. The first Rick Wakeman solo album has got some really cool stuff on it. Pipe organ.
So when you're still a kid, who are your heroes? Did you have heroes? Did you think in terms like that?
Yeah, I remember my parents not letting me watch James Brown when he was on Ed Sullivan. And it was a music style thing, and that's ended up being some of my favorites. Anyway, it's like, if you don't want your kids to listen to this, don't tell them not to. Yeah, because that's what they're going to end up.
I've had this discussion. Dwight Farmer.
Yeah.
Drew Collins. I've had that discussion. For me, it was Kiss.
Yeah.
For me, it was Kiss. I was like, you want to stop your kids, so you want them to do the opposite, then continue to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you want to be a good businessman like Gene Simmons,
yeah,
talk about marketing.
Well, when I was 10 years old in 1978.
Uh-huh.
I was the right age to accept that. They put out 5 albums that year.
Yeah. Oh man.
And comic books and
oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
I collect comic books, so I remember that.
Now, so James Brown.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're part Rick Wakeman, you're part classical, and then you have the James Brown. Okay.
Yeah.
And who else did you listen to?
Oh gosh. So the first thing that brought me to Columbus, let's put it that way, because let me go back.
Okay.
So I started right out of high school. I started into music school at Indiana University Extension in Fort Wayne.
Okay.
And at the same time, I had a job in a restaurant, and I started helping out a friend that was in a wedding reception band.
Uh-huh.
And I remember the transition. You and I were talking about not going from left brain to right brain, or left hemisphere to right hemisphere, but there's a certain amount of that.
Yeah.
And I had never played music not looking at a piece of music.
Mm-hmm.
I just had to have it in front of me. And
that's the classical tradition.
Right. And the wedding reception thing, I had to start figuring things out. And some of it you could find. That's like, I remember having a book of charts, and it had Immigrant Song in it. And I'm like, how come that doesn't sound like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm playing what's on the page. And I started learning how to use my ears and listen instead of just having to use my eyes to do that too. And so started doing a wedding reception band. And then I got into a band that was playing, actually the wedding reception band just kind of transitioned. And we started doing, Spirit, the band Spirit.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Mr. Skin and all of those things.
Randy, California.
What else we do? Oh, we played Hold Your Head Up, because there's a long solo there. So a little bit, I love Rod Argent. Man, what a player. I'm trying to think of what else. Gosh, it was kind of an assortment of things, but a little heavy on the rock.
Okay.
And at the same time, I'm going to college, trying to get a bachelor's degree. And I ended up switching my major a couple times, and I went into communication, electronic communication. And I was one semester from graduating, and I had a band in Fort Wayne, Indiana, want me to go on the road with them. And it's like, finish school, go on the road. Finish school, go on the road.
Yeah, okay.
So that's what I did. And, in the early part of that, within the first, 6 months, I was introduced to Bike Week at Daytona. And I'd always been fairly naive. So I kept looking. We played at this place called The Pier. And it's a club that's out over the water. It's up on risers. And there's a long pier to go out to it. And every night when the tide would come in, you'd have to announce that the tide's coming in. Because there were always people that had parked in Daytona. You can drive on the beach. So there were always cars. And sometimes by the time you made that announcement, people had imbibed a little too much. And by the time they get out to their car, the water was this high on their door.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a fun learning experience. And
timing is everything.
Gosh. And that band, it was right when disco was really happening. And there was very little about disco song-wise that I appreciated. And we tended to do more stuff like Isley Brothers. We did Parliament Funkadelic.
Yeah.
Lots of Gino. I love Gino Vanelli stuff, and I used to sing like that. I haven't tried in years, but he still sings like that.
Yeah.
But we used to kind of do that instead. And there were things that I heard arranging wise in the disco stuff that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Nile Rodgers stuff.
I will tell you this about disco. Of your friends, I don't know your friends. I know some of your friends, but of the people we know.
I have friends.
whatever. People, I am, you know, you say there's a Beatles, there's a Stone. Either you're Beatles or you're Stones.
Yeah.
I'm both.
Yeah.
All my, and most of my, I don't say most of my friends, most of my musician friends are afraid to say they like disco, but there are a lot of disco stuff that I completely
Oh yeah.
dug.
So I have a almost
Which I am a
15
rarity.
I have an almost
Make fun of me
15
all you want. I don't, you know, I'm tough.
I have an
can
almost
take it.
15-year-old bonus daughter,
Huh?
and she's really open to a lot of different music things. And I'll
Mhm.
drive her to school in the mornings. We got about 15 minutes, and we take turns playing things for each other. And I'm surprised at how many things that she knows that I know. And she listens to things that I would never have paid any attention to. For instance, she got me listening to Hamilton.
Oh
And,
yeah.
you know, I had no concept other than that I hear people going, oh, it's all rap. Well, it's not all rap. And it's one of the most, it should have happened to musical theater 25 years ago, you know? And as a result of that, we got tickets and went to see it when it was before COVID.
Yeah.
It was incredible. It was
Mhm.
just amazing. The vocals, the arranging,
The words.
the words blew me. And that's the one thing she said, if we ever get to go see this, you need to listen to the words in it.
Yes.
And that's what I would always tell people about is listen to the lyrics and be familiar with them. They go by very quickly. But there's a line
They're
in,
composed.
yeah, I think, yeah, Lin-Manuel Miranda is amazing. He's very creative. And I can't remember the exact line, but in one of the songs, I think it's Aaron Burr, and he makes a reference to his fire and brimstone, his grandfather being a fire and brimstone preacher.
Yeah.
And my bonus daughter had texted me and she said, do you know who Aaron Burr's grandfather was? And I said, well, yeah, actually I do. And it was, I'd looked it up. It was Jonathan Edwards, who was responsible for, he was kind of the core of a lot of revival that happened in England. And just, I mean, but there's all these little references that you can listen to that show. I mean, when we saw it live, I'd listened to it a number of times. I still heard things that I'd never heard in it before.
That's the best
But,
kind of music.
yeah, and it's based on, there's a biography that was written probably 20 years ago about Hamilton, but what a fabulous show. It's just, it's really, really good. And I like paying attention to young people and see what they're listening to and what they're paying attention to.
Yeah, well, that's the better stuff they're listening to.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's that.
I don't remember that what year that was when that was like the hugest thing, and everybody.
Which one?
Hamilton.
Oh yeah.
When that was out, and they knew every word.
Well, we were looking into going to go into the show. This has been maybe a year and a half. Well, it was just before, probably 6 months before COVID. And I'm looking at the theater in New York City, and they're all sold out for like 8 months into the future. You know, there's no way to get, and if you can get tickets, they're exorbitant anyway. Once you add a certain, I don't want to say it, but you know, the fees on things are just ridiculous. I just got tickets for Pilgrimage Festival, which is right about 3 miles from where we are.
Okay.
And this year, Dave Matthews is one of the headliners.
All right.
Black Puma is an amazing band. And it's people like that. It's kind of an Americana thing. But I'm looking at the tickets going, oh, this is not too bad. 2 days, it's great. And then you see the fee added on, and it's like, yeah. And then you have to pay for parking on top of that.
It's a night at the opera.
Yeah. Yep. Speaking of that,
let's go back to Indiana.
Okay. Oh.
Okay, so your schooling.
Yeah.
Well, there is in other words, one of the things that I really, really appreciate about you, and you're kind of a rarity. The classical discipline is about recreating to the best of your ability the intention and the beauty of what was composed on a printed page.
Absolutely.
You're trying to bring that music to life.
Right.
So the discipline that you learned from 4 years old was that you can read, fly stuff on a page, and you can make it sound like, but that is a completely different discipline than you were in the classical end of things at Indiana. So
Yeah.
how did you go about learning? Okay, because I know a lot of in years to come, and we're going to get into this, that you played in rock bands, you played in soul bands, you played in like Motown, you played in other things that had nothing to do with that discipline. How did you transition into that kind of frame of thought?
I don't think it was a deliberate thing at all. It was the first time that, I used to listen to, I think the thing that drew me to Gino Vanelli was the fact that his band, before he got really famous, was 2 keyboard players and a drummer and a percussionist in Gino. There's no bass player, there's no guitarist in it.
Yeah.
And I was intrigued with that. And when you listen to those things, you start thinking about it from an arranging perspective of, you don't just play everything like a piano part or like an organ part.
Yeah.
You have to start listening to it. You don't play bass like it's, when Gino was on the road, no, not Gino, Gary Wright, Steve Porcaro, one of his first live gigs, he was out on the road playing bass on a mini Moog with Gary Wright, who did Dreamweaver.
Yeah.
And I just started listening to arranging things. And there's something in R&B, there's something in funk. I love funk music. And that was when I played with the band that went out on the road that took me away from school, or that I volunteered to go away from school. That was a lot of what we were doing. The Isley Brothers, there was one album they had called Climbing Up the Ladder. And it was so sparse, but everything that was in it was exactly what belonged in it. Mother's Finest was another band.
Yeah. And we talk about like Donald Fagen's Nightfly.
Yeah.
That lesson, there's lessons in that. You go ahead and tell.
Yeah, I had an experience. I was doing a session, and after it was over, the engineer's a really good friend, and he said, "Hey, can I play something for you?" And I went, "Yeah." He put on Donald Fagen's Nightfly, and he said, "Okay, so what I want you to listen to in here is where he's not playing," and that's like the sound of one hand clapping.
Yeah.
And I listened to the whole thing. I sat and listened to the whole thing, and I started understanding. And not long after that, I got involved with some bands that's what they were doing, was R&B and funk. And several of them would have another keyboardist too. And so you don't just play the same thing that the other keyboardist is playing. You listen.
You adapt to the situation, and you
absolutely
like a weave.
Yep. Absolutely. And it's that whole thing of if you play through the whole thing, I try to explain this, and the best way I can explain it is, say, if you listen to an orchestra and you've got a chart that's 2 pages, however many bars, you want it to be 64 bars, and we take it out of let's take it out of Prokofiev. So it's what's the Peter and the Wolf.
Yeah.
So you take that out. How often is the piccolo playing?
Yeah.
Well, it's playing 16 measures and then it doesn't play. That's right. How often are the strings playing? Well, they do the same thing. And so orchestration, and that's what I was saying about the disco thing, was I listened to string charts, horn charts, things like that. I started listening to that and recognizing that it's the space that makes the music.
Yes.
It really is. It's the air.
Yeah.
You got to have the air in it to.
In my line of work, we call that pocket.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you got to be forever cognizant of it, because I call that littering.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and that comes with. I heard Jeff Skunk Baxter. Somebody was talking to him about. I don't remember if it was on the. No, anyway, there's an interview with him, and he said, I realized that the less notes I play, the more money I make per note in session work. So
that is, yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's realistic, but
Yeah.
it's also very very important to recognize those things. Um, and you could call it tasteful,
Yeah.
or
Would you
there's
using your ears and your reactionary? These are
yeah.
all skills. So what I'm getting at is once you got into these kinds of playing situations, you took on a completely different where I'm having to listen for my part.
Oh yes,
I'm
yeah,
trying to have to listen, and I'm putting my pieces in where they need to be.
right.
That's a completely different discipline
Oh yeah,
than the classical realm. And there's
right.
no disrespect to any of it,
Oh no, and
because I
that's what.
think we agree that both are great.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
they just have different
Yeah.
applications.
Yes.
And going from, it's funny, there was one of the bands I played with that was in Columbus, was on the Motown label, and it was when Prince was really ripping. He was
Yeah.
really well known, and we did this gig, and it was in Atlanta. It was a
Who is the
convention,
band?
Cocoa Pop.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And they were every year each one of the labels would sponsor whatever their up and coming band was, to do a showcase. And so the thing's called Jack the Rapper, and it was all of the R&B soul, all of the radio stations in the country, all of the DJs come to it. And so we'd done sound check and hanging out it was actually in the hotel in a great big convention room. So we done the sound check, the room's pretty empty. And when we came back out to actually do the show, I I think my chin was like, because the front row I saw Tina Turner and Lionel Richie, and there was like a half a dozen people
Who's
there
who?
that I'm
Who's
going,
who?
what am I doing playing in front of these people?
Yeah.
But it was well received. So anyway, just fun.
Little bit about James Brown, because I know that's an influence on you.
Yeah.
So what did you get from James Brown?
Busy bass player.
Okay.
Slamming pockets and busy bass player. And that goes right into the realm of Tower of Power too.
Yeah.
Garibaldi and what's his
Rocco Prestia.
Yeah. Gosh, amazing players.
Tribe. That's a fist bump.
Yeah, definitely. And about 4 years ago, there's a place in town called City Winery, and it's fairly small venue, maybe 300 seats, but they have some amazing acts go through there. I've always enjoyed the Mavericks, and and Raul Malo was doing his own thing down there. It was incredible. It was just amazing.
That's the best kind of stuff.
But the best show I'd say that I've seen in years was Tower of Power at City Winery. The mix was fabulous. I mean, it was just incredible, but it wasn't Prestia playing. Garibaldi was back and was playing, but Prestia wasn't playing. But man,
but they had somebody that was the stunt double.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because he was let go because he in the 70s because he wouldn't slap bass.
Right.
Okay.
And then
next time around, they realized this is a part of our sound, and hooray for Rocco, because he stuck to his guns and this is his style, and he
absolutely
he defined a prototype.
Yeah.
So the guy that they get to replace him has to sound like him.
He does. I mean, all the things in all the 30-second note stuff that he does in there, he does them. It's funny because I started listening to James Brown again after I got into Tower of Power. Yeah. And it's the same, the bass player, it's Bootsy and part of that.
James Brown, Sex Machine,
and so there's that. I love Maceo Parker. He's the sax player of James Brown. All of those guys were really good.
Yeah.
James was just something else.
James is a new kind of conductor.
Yep.
He's a new kind of conductor.
Yep, I agree.
So did blues ever enter in your mix?
not on purpose. I mean, it's kind of like country. When I moved down here, I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do because I thought country was the only thing that was going on here.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize there was there's an amazing core of talent of other things going on.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I didn't do that. And the country thing. So one of my favorite songs to listen to new monitors on is Bonnie Raitt's "I Can't Make You Love Me."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the keyboard playing on that is incredible. There's no guitar on it anywhere.
I charted it out. It's hard to play on guitar.
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah, it's challenging. The chords, the Rhodes chords and the Bruce Hornsby stuff in it's just, that's superlative. I love the way that's done.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as blues things, I love Johnny Lang.
I was just saying blues keyboards, is any kind of Hammond, you never went through that?
Well, I love Jimmy Smith. There's, DeFrancesco. There's so many good players, but I'm more of I love David Sanchez.
Okay.
David Sanchez was Bruce Springsteen's original keyboard player, and then he got out on his own and he did projects for CBS and Columbia. And again, they're just mind-blowing stuff. He ended up being music director for Peter Gabriel for a while.
Okay.
He was out on tour with Seal, and the band was, oh gosh, I can't remember which guitar player it was. Probably Michael Landau.
Okay.
Tony Levin playing bass, and I just can't remember. Who was it?
Those are no slouches.
Yeah, I can't remember. And the drummer was the same caliber, but Sanchez is the perfect blend of jazz and rock and classical, and he gets it all. And there's a soul to it when he does it. His instruments speak. When he plays, it sounds like saxophone is something. There's a lot of sounds on synthesizers that you can emulate a real instrument if you understand arranging. But there are a lot of things you can't do, and sax is one of them. I would always rather have a real sax player. I'd always rather have real instruments anyway.
Well, I hear you're a closet guitar nerd on your
Yeah, there's that in there. But when you play with really good guitar players, when I played with Tom Wisen, he's an amazing guitarist, and he was one of the first guys that I remember being able to do Jeff Beck stuff. And like the taste, like Wired and Blow by Blow and those kind of Jeff Beck.
Fusion years. Let's talk about when did you start playing with those guys? Durzo and was it Money or was it the Muffs?
It started out as the Muffs, and they were going through transition at the time. Steve Sines was still singing with them at the time. And I don't know the politics. I have no idea, but I was playing in a club. The band I was playing with at the time was a pretty much prog rock stuff. We did a whole bunch of Genesis stuff, but it was kind of that behind the lines. Actually, we did behind the lines. And it's kind of funny in hindsight. One of my best friends is the drummer that hung out with them. Chester, yeah. But we did a bunch of that, just more prog rock stuff. And we were playing in this club, and Durzo came in, and I'd met him before. All of Columbus musicians kind of know each other.
That's what's wonderful about Columbus.
It really is. It's different than any other city I've seen. But he came in and hung out, and he said, "Hey, would you have any interest in coming and playing with us?" And I said, "Well, I got a gig." And he went, "Well, we'd just like you to come and play with us." And so I went and played with them. And it was funny because in the band that I was in, there were times we had we had a bass player that played guitar, and then the guitarist. And sometimes the bass player would also play. So we'd have two guitars, and I'd play left-handed bass on the mini Moog. And we were doing some stuff that it took some brains to think about
how are you going to make this work,
right? And The Muffs thing was more like, I don't know how to compare them musically. There's very strong Cars influence in there. I mean, I can hear Rick Ocasek kind of stuff in it a little bit. But it was less is more.
Yes.
And I mean, that was another place that I learned to do that, to,
Yeah.
you know, don't play your left hand when there's a bass player,
Yeah.
you know, or find another keyboard sound.
Especially if it's Durzo.
Well, yeah, there's that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. He's there. He's playing.
Yeah. I hear he can be a little, tenacious when he came to asking you to get together. We won't discuss how, but he's
Yeah, I love each
Yeah.
one of those guys in the band.
He's got Viking energy.
Yes, he does. Yeah. And man, all the stuff he's been through a lot of stuff physically too. And he's still, I listened to his interview that you did.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, I didn't remember that name.
Yeah.
You know, there were so many of those things that he remembered. But so anyway, I ended up playing with him, and it was the first band that I worked with that felt like the business was handled properly.
Okay.
They were very creative and very artistic. And at the time that I started playing with them, they were kind of like a house band at the Agora, or not the Agora. It was the Agora at the time, and people would line up around the block to get in to see them. And one of the earliest things that we did was we went to Cleveland and recorded an album's worth of material. The engineer was Dale Peters. Do you know Dale?
He was the drummer for James Gang?
No, he was the bass player for James Gang.
Okay, bass player for James Gang.
Yeah.
Okay. I love his bass playing, even though I don't know his name.
Yeah. He fit. He knew where to play and where not to play.
Yeah.
He got paid more per note.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we did a whole album there, and the vocalist went away, and we came back to Columbus and started kind of getting to know the people down at Bison, the recording studio. The chief engineer is Gary Hedden, who's ended up being a really good friend. He worked on Phil Keaggy's first 3 albums. I think he engineered all of those.
Okay.
And then my favorite one of Phil Keaggy's stuff is The Master and the Musician, which is all instrumental. And it's dated well.
Meaning what?
Huh?
Meaning what?
Meaning the production on it was done so well that it doesn't sound
dated.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It went well. So anyway, we ended up, we tried redoing some of the songs, and then most everything got redone and rewritten in completely different songs. And then we did the first Money album, and it was a fun experience. I mean, I enjoyed having a road crew.
Yeah.
I wasn't used to, and I had, one of my instruments was a 280-pound Yamaha synth called a CS80. It 8 voice polyphony, and it was also polyphonic aftertouch. So, you know, as you push on the keys, you could get vibrato for just one note, but not all the rest of them. It was fairly advanced, but it was 280 pounds, and I was so happy to be able
have somebody else be
to
lifting
carry them. Yeah. Of course, a lot of road crew folks don't treat your gear the way that you treat it, but we were very fortunate. We had good crew guys. Yeah. So that was that.
So what happened? What happened after Money?
I got through. I guess I just got tired of doing all that. I think in the back of my mind the whole time that I had been out of college, I was craving finishing college. And it was more of just a completion thing of,
I understand. I did the same.
You only had 1 semester left and you didn't finish. And being able to have intelligent conversations with people that, you know, when we were playing in clubs, that was not where you find
intelligent conversation,
a thriving conversation. And so I just felt like, and there were family issues at the time. And so I took a job part-time, I thought, working in a music retail store in Columbus.
Yes.
And at that same time,
Coils, right?
yes, and I'd started doing session work. And another friend that has ended up being long-term friend is, everybody knows him by Muscle. His name's Tim Haupt, and he was the drummer in Heatwave. And he came into that music store one day, and we just started talking, and just, and I'm standing there going, I'm on commission. I should stop talking. Nah, keep talking, because there was a thing that was happening there. I mean, he's been a lifelong friend as since I've met him.
Yeah.
And we still talk. He's going to come down. He keeps saying he's going to come down here, but I haven't seen him yet. But anyway, he plays with there's a band out of OSU. Is it called the Jazz Crusaders? Jazz Patrol.
Okay.
Jazz Patrol. He was the drummer in Jazz Patrol. So anyway, people started coming in, and I get session work, and it was with a whole different genre. I did, session work with a number of the R&B bands at the time, and loved it. And then Heatwave started being a thing again, and it was past all the hits.
Yeah.
They were looking for somebody.
You're still super cool in my even though it's past all the hits. You're not Rod, but you're not that cool.
Oh my word. No.
Did you ever meet him?
I'm not. I met him once, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. He owned a castle at the time.
Okay.
And I assume that's what writing Thriller for Michael Jackson will do for you in royalty.
Groove Line.
Yeah, he did. He wrote a bunch of those. That was a hard thing when we go out and play live, to do like a 12-minute, 15-minute version of Groove Line.
That's wonderful, though. That has to be wonderful, because it had to be done right. I've never done it right.
Those guys are amazing musicians. I used to tease them because their denomination of church, their denomination that they're in, doesn't use instruments. It's just it's a perspective that they've got, but they do a cappella stuff. And Timmy's wedding, I went to it, and it was all a cappella vocals, and it was beautiful because Keith Wilder is the guy that sang Always and Forever.
Okay.
And when I started playing with him, he'd been in a car accident and ended up as a quadriplegic, but he could still sing.
Yeah.
And his brother is the one that sang Groove Line.
Okay.
And so as we're prepping to do this, I had to watch reruns of Soul Train so I could pick up the moves and stand up and play at the same time. So it was quite a learning experience, but they were great players, really good players. So I tease them about not using their instruments in church. But.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. I'm not even going to go there.
Oh, you can go there. What? It's all right.
But I'm just like, what is the philosophy of no music in church?
It's not no music. It's no instruments.
No instruments.
And that particular denomination, which I shake my head. I've had a lot of encounters. They believe that when you look at scripture, the Old Testament, this is my best understanding of it. I've never been a member. The Old Testament has got all sorts of instruments in it.
Yeah.
And it talks about David establishing the temple, and that one of the requirements to be a worship leader in the temple was you had to build your own instrument. So there's a lot of amazing things that were involved in that, but they expected excellence because they're serving the creator of the universe, who the same day, and this is my understanding, the same day that God created raspberries, of which there are no two exactly alike, he created zebras, of which there are no two alike. And if snowflakes. Snowflakes is, that's the one that the scientists always talk about. But if you're serving and honoring that creator, then what you do needs to be done with excellence, not perfectionism, because I go to, Jesus Christ is the only one that was perfect. So there's no way to be perfect like that. You strive for that, but we do things the best we can do with what we've got, and that's excellence.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Perfection is, I don't know, perfectionism, that's not where it's at.
no, and that's also a tendency of I love let me talk about language for just a minute because I love this.
All right.
The two hemisphere perspective of your left hemisphere is the pragmatic, everything is measurable. It's Greek. The Greek language is very much left brain dominant. The right hemisphere dominance is esoteric, it's artsy. And at the same time, I saw this research that had been done, and they determined that different languages reside in different places in your brain.
Yeah.
So there are left brain hemisphere or left hemisphere languages and right hemisphere languages. And it just so happens, so the Bible, the Old Testament is written in Hebrew, primarily. There's Aramaic also, but it's primarily Hebrew, which tends to be a right brain dominant language.
Okay.
So it paints pictures. And when you take one Hebrew word, it's so specific in meaning, but it can be, I don't even know how to explain it, broad strokes. The New Testament is written in Greek, which is very specific, and it means exact things. It doesn't mean general terms. And so to have both of those things together is really intriguing to me. Musicians tend to be, artists tend to be right brain dominant.
Yeah.
And then, but there's no 100% rule.
Well, it depends on what kind. We'll take this back to the classical versus jazz.
Right.
A lot of your classical are more, a lot of them are left brain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They need that order.
Yes. And Bach.
And then somebody like myself, I'm kind of both, but I'm more right, because they say educators. They say educators are both.
Right.
Because they understand that you're one or the other, but because we educate, we have formalized systems.
Right.
To be able
and
to
how you educate also is another aspect of that too. I do there's a class that I teach, and it's called Network, and it is not about networking, but it's about spiritual gifts that are listed in scripture. It's kind of like an abbreviated Myers-Briggs profile, and then a passion. And it contends that God has given you all three of those things, but that virtually you're going to have a hard time finding somebody that's identical to you.
Yes.
And it's fun to teach that class, especially when you do it with married couples, because almost invariably one of their light bulbs is going to go on, and they're going to go, oh, now I understand why I feel the way I do, why I'm passionate about this, why I'm not. And then there's a pause, and they look at their spouse and go, oh,
yeah.
You do.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like this is why you shouldn't change.
Right.
Certain
yeah.
People,
and you don't.
Certain people shouldn't change their authentic selves because there is a reason for that.
Right. And there are things that you can accomplish.
Even if that makes you a unicorn, yes. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. What you are able to accomplish on your own is nothing compared to when you have a mate that is matched that way and not identical.
Yes.
You go through the things and go, how did we ever get drawn together? Oh, look at what happens when we blend our gifts and blend.
Exactly. You don't want I don't want my exact duplicate.
No, if there's two identical people, there's no reason for one of you.
Yeah.
And you don't. I've heard pastors in marriages, when they do the wedding thing, talking about this person completes you, and I don't believe that's the case. I think that your relationship with the Lord is what completes you. When you come together with two complete people, you complement each other. So anyway, I'm sorry.
If it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to understand that there's intentionality behind that, though. And every time that I've done a Myers-Briggs or any kind of a personality profile, I end up being a little over on the right-hand side, but pretty much left and right brain, which is why
you're a person of, as I said, I consider you an educator too.
Yeah, that's one of my number one gifts is teaching.
Yeah.
And every time I do that silly thing, I know how to manipulate those studies now, but I don't want to do that. I want to see how it comes out, and it's the same results every time.
Mm-hmm.
But that allows me, in hindsight, what I do now. I'm a pastor of worship in the arts,
Mm-hmm.
and if I were completely right brain dominant, I wouldn't be able to get anything done.
Yeah.
And I might not be able to tie my shoes in the morning if you're so far over there.
Yeah.
But I recognize that what my task is to help people in their spiritual walk more than anything else. I mean, music is the common denominator.
Yeah.
And arts, those are the commonalities in it. And these people,
it is the language, the tools that you work with.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love, there's a National Education Association survey, not a survey, a study that they did. It's been years ago, but they've proven, and I'm talking about education, I'm flopping around, sorry.
No.
There's too many things to talk about. They've proven that a child that has a year and a half of formal music education, so learning to read notation
Mm-hmm.
and learning how to make your hands work, and I would always suggest piano because there's more polyphony than any other instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn to read two
guitar.
stages.
Kidding.
Can you play? No. There's okay. Don't let me get away from this. There was a Frank Zappa notation thing I saw
Mm-hmm.
that Chester Thompson played with them, and he was showing me this chart, and on the staves on the bottom of it, there's this big black bar that goes across both staves. And I've never seen that in notation before, and a little asterisk beside it. And at the bottom of the page, it says place both buttocks on keyboard.
How do you note that? That's how you notate that.
That's how that's notated. Yes.
Yeah. So go back to your teaching, the notation and polyphony.
Right. Yes. So they have basically determined that in 99.9% of the cases, that 1.5 years of formal music education will almost guarantee at least a 20% higher ACT or an SAT score.
Mm-hmm.
So I read that and go, what parent wouldn't want their children to have that education? At the same time, one of the things when I started in music school, so IU at that time had School of Jazz and a classical school, and there the twain shall meet.
Yeah.
They don't talk to each other basically. Yeah. One of the Marsalis brothers, Winton or Branford, is kind of responsible.
I'm guessing it's probably Winton.
Probably, yeah. I don't remember. I mean, they're both so they're brilliant. But that was kind of the first of that, bringing those two together.
Yeah.
But having to learn, and that goes back to when I was trying to get from looking at a book all the time to using my ears. And so I always suggest to people when they're getting their kids music lessons, give them a year of the Suzuki method as well, which is using your ears entirely.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of, I don't want to say this and say everybody's like this. There are a lot of times when people have studied classical music and they don't listen to what's going on around them.
Well, it's a different experience, and I'm not criticizing class. Neither of us are.
Oh no, not at all.
But it has been proven that if the way you're experiencing performance has something to do with what you're reading. Okay, so you are experiencing this differently.
Yep.
You're not adjusting anything.
Right. It's another right brain thing too.
Yes.
And I give, so the worship teams that I work with, the singers, I give them a hard time because almost every church now has got what we call a confidence monitor. So when you're standing up on the platform and you're singing out toward the congregation, on the back wall, there's a big screen TV and it'll have the words for the songs on it. And I give them a hard time because I want them to know the words, because there is a physiological thing that happens when you are reading from a page or reading characters. There's an analysis that goes on Whereas if you know the words, you sing them from,
yeah.
you sing them with passion, you sing them with
Soul,
heart.
soul music. That's taken
There,
from soul music.
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
actually knowing what the words mean, and
Right.
and you're not, yeah, we're on the same, yeah, we're on the same boat. We know, yeah, I know what you do. And these are issues, but
They all are, and they're just fascinating things. There's so many things to talk about and ponder. And
so your music is one of your main tools. What do you think it does on a deep level, like in teaching, the pedagogical, and getting into the almost like the meditative, like what you're saying is once they know the words, they can go inside. So what do you think the power of music in what you do?
well, I know it's healing. I know it can physically cause healing.
Mhm.
Um, there's it depends on how technical you want to get about it, but music is all of sound is vibration. It's all cycles. It's all cyclical. So,
Mhm.
your subwoofers are 40 hertz and under, and it's how fast the waveform recycles as it goes on. The higher pitches, the faster the vibration is. When you get up at a certain height, you start looking at light. So, you think about things. You can hear like a fluorescent lamp, you can hear it, and it's because of the speed that it's vibrating at. I'm not a scientist. I just know things that I've read, listened to, and
Yeah.
studied.
Hmm.
But you start looking at those kind of things. There was an instrument called an orchestron, and it was kind of an inexpensive version of a mellotron, which used tape heads. It had however many keys, 37 notes, I think. And
Okay.
for each one of the keys on it, there's a rack inside the instrument, and it had what essentially looked like a half-inch reel-to-reel tape. And when you push the key down, the tape head goes out and it pulls the tape past it, so it would play a recording.
Hmm.
So when you hear, I don't know, In the Court of the Crimson King,
Okay.
the beginning of that, those are violin samples on it. And you push down it's in D, so you push down the D, the F sharp, the A, that's that first chord, and the tape is rolling past the tape heads on it.
Okay.
But it's only 8 seconds long, so it gets down to that and it stops and it has to snap back up.
Yeah.
So the orchestron, the man that, can't think of his name, he started exploring this whole idea of God's creation and color. There are colors we can't see. We know there are pitches that we can't see
Hmm.
because dogs respond to them. And you hear children saying, but I hear this, and you can't hear it anymore because you're, however old you are, you're over 30 years old and you're male.
Yeah.
And so those things change. But all of those things interact together, and I recognize the power of healing in music. Um, it's just fascinating. I don't want to get too deep. There's a really excellent book. It's called Gödel, Escher, and Bach, and it's about that thick, and it's an academic book.
Okay.
Gödel is a mathematician.
Hmm.
Escher, you know who MC Escher
Yeah.
was, the artist,
Painter.
draws the impossible buildings and
Yeah.
things. And then Bach. And it basically shows you, the simple term is that it shows you they're all three doing exactly the same thing.
Hmm.
It's the same formula, just in different outgrowths of things.
Yeah.
So
I like the fact that you're saying that there's some sounds we're not meant to hear,
right,
lower or higher. Some
right.
some colors we can't see.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
I
this
firmly
is
believe
true. We're left with we're left with understanding that we can't necessarily absolutely 100% unequivocally know, but it exists in some form. Anyway,
right. And I
that's part of the spirit.
right, and not to I don't want to stand up in the pulpit and preach about it.
You
I
can.
believe firmly that what I read in scripture is that when we die, um, we'll have newly created bodies, newly formed bodies. They'll be rejuvenated, and we'll be able to hear things that we haven't heard before. And we'll be able to see things we haven't been able to see before. And I think about there are some worship artists, I use that term cautiously, who have decided that they would go some other country and teach people how to worship. And they use Western music to do that. So there are so many other musical approaches. There are systems where instead of 12 pitches in an octave, you've got 15.
Polytonal.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the audacity,
India, and yep.
The audacity of me deciding I'm going to teach you how to do it.
You're not doing it right. That's
when you've got your own scale that God's given you. And I just can't imagine when heaven is present, we'll hear things that we haven't heard before.
Yeah.
And we're not going to see this person that's a worship leader up there leading worship. We're going to hear and see things we've never heard before. In scripture, it's funny. We talk about, so the book of Revelation that's supposed to have an image of what heaven is going to look like in it. And there's a passage where it talks about essentially, and I always tease my pastor friends, I read through Revelation and I don't see anywhere where there's sermons in there, but I see worship. So, I give them a hard time about that. But people say, well, that's all we're going to do is sing music. That's it. It's a whole lot bigger than that. And I see what's portrayed in there. There are seraphim. So there are angels bowing down before the throne. And they bow down because they're in awe of what they see when they're in God's presence. And when they come back up again, they say the same thing. They say, holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, because they've seen something completely different. And God is not, he doesn't look like Gandalf. He
look at the guy on the Kansas Leftoverture album.
Yeah, that one. That one with the staff.
Yeah, he's not up in the sky with the staff determining who's winning the football game.
It's not that. And it's just such an amazing thing to think about when all of the stuff that is wrong, all of the stuff we struggle with, and I keep going back to this. So in the beginning of Genesis is a picture of God's creation. There's a garden, there's a male and a female, there's animals, and it's the way that God designed things to be. And when the fall happens, and we can debate about what exactly that is, but when the fall happens,
I blame Snake.
Well, entropy enters the picture.
Yes.
Because in scripture, it says that we were created for eternity. Our bodies were created to live forever. And then entropy enters the picture. Human decisions, human knowledge. They probably introduced politicians at that point in time too. And so you have things that start falling apart. And it's everything. I mean, food rots. The tires on your car get rot. Things fall apart. They don't get better. If you just leave something unattended, it's not going to get better. It's not going to improve on its own. And so it'll be fascinating to see what things were supposed to be like in the beginning anyway. So, okay, I'll step down off the pulpit now.
No, this is all good stuff. This is what we're here for, Neil. We're going to wrap it up. We should have another one of these sometime in the future. This is wonderful. Okay. This is wonderful, and I thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
And I feel kin with you.
Well,
yeah. So it's
yeah.
And anyway, so thank you so much, and bless you, and I'll be coming down. Yeah, your house is better than my house.
Oh, I don't know if it's better. It's just you
got cooler neighbors.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? One of my favorite neighbors. I can't wait to meet him. Is and I can't think of his name. I keep thinking it. There's a Mark Martell. Do you know who Mark Martell is?
I don't.
Mark was in a Christian band called Down Here, and he's had quite a solo career, but he was, when Adam Lambert is not on the road with Queen, he's the guy that was singing with him. And if you want to see something that'll blow you away, just get on YouTube, type in Mark Martell, Somebody to Love.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just him with a microphone, and there's a track playing.
Yeah.
And it will, and he just bought some property down the street from us. So
Right.
I'm looking forward to having a neighborhood welcoming for him. So
All right. Yeah. So make Jello.
yeah.
Make pie for him. All righty.
Yeah.
Bless you and see you, and thank you so much.
Thank you kindly. Blessings on you too as well.